as John mentioned in our agenda, we'll be discussing first how to use Data Shuttle. And our example today is how to use Data Shuttle for managing all the contracts that might be living across various systems or Excel spreadsheets at your organization and bringing them into Smartsheet for one source of truth so that you can understand where contracts are, when things might be renewing, when things are expiring, so that contracts don't fall through the cracks and you're doing your due diligence to make sure that you're keeping up with those. My name is Amy Nguyen. I'm a solutions engineer based in Austin, Texas. I'm very excited to be chatting with you all today. So let's hop right in. Okay, so just some context here. I already kind of did it in that first intro slide, but again, we're going over using contract management so that we can have visibility into the multitude of contracts that might be tracked across different systems or different Excel spreadsheets if you're doing it on a more manual basis, and creating a way to set up reminders for the team when contracts might be set to expire. You need to reach out to the person to renew it, to get new things signed, right? So things don't fall through the cracks. So our solution for handling that tool or to handling that process is going to be using Data Shuttle. Data Shuttle is a fantastic tool for aligning data, again, across multiple systems of record into one singular view. Data Shuttle is an automated process so that you're not having to manually import new information, copy paste information into a master spreadsheet and Smartsheet. Data Shuttle knows where to read information from. It could be CSV file, Excel files that live in OneDrive and SharePoint. You might be attaching them just directly in Smartsheet. We set up that where to read the information from and automatically read the data from that file and then bring it into Smartsheet automatically on a schedule basis so that you're not having to manually make those updates or set calendar reminders to do that yourself. So Data Shuttle is a way to make what could be a complex, very manual process into a streamlined, automated toolkit or configuration so that you're not having to worry about that. You're letting the system do the work for you. So let's hop into a demo and get an idea of what this looks like, specifically within contract management. So as we hop over into the product, you'll see that I'm just diving straight into an example dashboard that helps me understand the status of the contracts that we have, what we have upcoming renewing, how much money we're planning to spend over the next couple months, whatever data is going to be important for you to understand about the types of contracts that you and your team manage. So this is the current state of information as we have contracts currently living in Smartsheet. But again, those contracts are ever changing. We are onboarding new vendors all the time, signing new contracts. Contracts are expiring, things are renewing. So I want to make sure that this dashboard is automatically kept up to date with that information. I want to have that real-time visibility without having to manually update the data source myself, right? So let's look at the data source that helps support the information that flows onto this dashboard. This is the current data set. You'll see I have a short list of contracts just for illustrative purposes today. I have about 21 contracts, and they are in various stages, right? We signed them all throughout the year. Things are expiring at any given time. I want this data to be kept up to date, not manually by myself, not going in and typing this information, but just based off the data that our teams are already updating in other sources, like our ERP system, for example. So how do I get the information in Smartsheet updated based off my ERP data? Well, using Data Shuttle is going to rely on CSV files, or Excel files, or Google files, or Google Sheet files. So in my case, let's say that I have an export of my ERP contracts, and I'm choosing to display that information, in this case, in Google Drive. So this is my file. You'll notice that there are some changes. There are some differences between my most recent export from my ERP versus what currently lives in Smartsheet. I have several more contracts. So in this case, I have 26 contracts. And then some of my existing ones have expired. Some of them may have new dates. Maybe we have extended one of our contracts recently, for example. And again, I'm entering that data in my ERP because that's my source of truth. But I want that information reflected in Smartsheet so that I have those beautiful dashboards, so I have those notifications coming in. So how do I get this data updated in Smartsheet? That's where our Data Shuttle tool comes into play. So this is Data Shuttle. And I want to call out here that to use Data Shuttle or to build these connections that allow us to update information in Smartsheet based off data from an external system, I do not need to be a coder. I do not need to be a programmer. I do not need to be the smartest person in the world to get this set up. I have this really fantastic, easy to use workflow configuration where I just click and set up my workflow. So the first step is choosing where your data source lives. In my case, it's from Google Drive, but you have several options. So if you are offloading data from an external system into SharePoint or OneDrive on a regular basis is probably what I see the most often, or out to Google Drive in my case, you can configure your workflow to know where to pick up the new most recent file from. And then the second step is, of course, where should this data update in Smartsheet? In my case, I have a sheet called Contracts from ERP. Pretty straightforward here. And then how do I want the information from that external CSV file to write into my Smartsheet document? In my case, I'm going to merge the data. So this means that if data from an existing contract that already exists in Smartsheet is being updated from ERP, so for example, the status of a contract has changed to expired, we extended a due date recently, those existing rows will automatically be updated in Smartsheet. And I'm also making sure that any new rows or any new contracts in the ERP are also added to Smartsheet. So we're merging the data. But another option that you have is to replace the data. If you want to just get rid of everything on your sheet and just replace it with whatever is coming from your ERP, you have the option to do that as well. Next step, you have the ability to filter your data. So let's say from my ERP, I have thousands upon thousands of contracts that live in that tool, but really I only want to bring in the contracts from the last 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or whatever time frame it is. Or maybe you only want to bring in contracts that are owned by a particular person or relate to a particular vendor, right? If you want to filter the information from that large CSV file and only bring in certain bits of that into Smartsheet, you have the ability to set up those filters so that you're only bringing in data that makes sense for you and your team. The next step is choosing the mapping. So this is really the bread and butter, I guess, or the main point of using Data Shuttle is mapping the columns from your ERP, or I'm sorry, in my case, my ERP data, my export file, and then mapping those to the columns that live in Smartsheet. Now, you'll notice that my column names are the exact same between my export file and my Smartsheet document, but they don't have to be, right? If my for example, the contract description field from my ERP, I wanted to just call that description in Smartsheet. I could set that up. That's not a problem. I just want to make sure that the data that exists from my Excel sheet maps to the appropriate organized place in Smartsheet. So just want to call that out. You can even have columns that live in Smartsheet that are not being driven by anything from your Excel file, right? So I'm calculating a health in Smartsheet. I'm not capturing a health value in my ERP, and that's totally okay. I could do that just in Smartsheet. I don't need anything to map to that column. I can just manually update that from Smartsheet itself. So lots of different ways to help manage the data flowing back and forth between the two tools. You can run this on a schedule. You can run this as often as every single day, as frequently as every 15 minutes if you wanted to make sure that your data in Smartsheet is as close to real time as possible. I'm going to turn off this schedule so that I don't overwork our system since this is just a demo environment, but you would be more than welcome to set that on a schedule so that once you set it, you can just totally forget about it. And that's really the last step of building out your workflow. Technically, you do have this option to insert expressions. I have found that using this expressions option is become moot after we have the ability to set up column formulas in Smartsheet. But we keep this in there in case you want to add any formulas to your sheet to make sure things are automatically calculating in. You're just going to name your workflow, save it, and that's it. That workflow is set up in your Data Shuttle environment. It's automatically running in the background if you set it up on a schedule. So anytime changes are made to your data source or you're exporting new information from, in this case, my ERP, whenever that schedule is next set to run, the information will automatically update in Smartsheet. Now, because I did not set up the schedule, and because we're in a demo, I want to automatically update this right now. I can always go into my Data Shuttle workflow or Data Shuttle environment, find the workflow, and manually run it. So if I need new data right now for a meeting that I have in 10 minutes, for example, I can go ahead and manually run it. I'm going to give this a quick refresh. We can see that the run is currently in progress. And if I head back to my sheet, after a few moments, I should see, right, this status of this contract move from active to expired. I should see this legal retainer end date automatically update, and I should see those new rows come in just a moment. And once this data is updated in Smartsheet based off the updates from my ERP file, my dashboard will then automatically update. So let me head back to Data Shuttle. I'm going to give this a quick refresh. I can see that it has successfully run as of just a minute ago. So if I head back to my sheet and give this a refresh, there we have it. I don't have 21 rows anymore. I now have 26 rows. I have more contracts that have been expired, and I have new end dates for some of my contracts. This is an exact reflection of that most recent file that I pulled from my ERP. And if I head back to my dashboard and give this a refresh, oh, it looks like it already refreshed for me. I can see those new contract numbers automatically update. My values have gone up because I have more contracts available now. And all of this is in real time. All right. Well, thank you so much for tracking on this Data Shuttle workflow for me. I know that we have a couple of questions. Oh, actually, before we get to questions, my apologies. We have a couple minutes till we need to do that. So some key takeaways on Data Shuttle. Again, this is a tool that's going to allow us to centralize data across multiple platforms into a single source of truth. So that does mean that you could have multiple Data Shuttle workflows looking at Excel files pulled from multiple sources, then pulling into one sheet in Smartsheet. We are eliminating those manual processes and allowing for a more automated routine to help reduce administrative burden, to help reduce the risk of error that might occur when you're manually updating or copy pasting things into the system. So ultimately, we're creating a more efficient process, again, that is less prone to error. So while we talked about using Data Shuttle today as an example for bringing in contracts from ERP systems, I just want to show another or give you some ideas on where Data Shuttle might make sense. Perhaps you are tracking invoices and you want to track the statuses of those invoices and have a pretty dashboard in Smartsheet that allows you to see what the status of those invoices are, who we're still waiting for updates from so that we can task our teams with following up on those, right? That would be a great Data Shuttle use case. Maybe you're tracking actual time from another tool and you want to bring that time tracking data into Smartsheet so you can run analytics. Or maybe you have other data from your ERP, accounts payable systems, CRM systems that you want to provide updates for. Those are all fantastic examples of when to use Data Shuttle. All right. Happy to help answer any questions that have come up. I see we have a few here.
Yeah, Amy, this is Chaz. We've got several that came in that Tim and I have been answering live, so thanks so much, folks. Keep those coming. But there are a few that made a little bit of sense to answer verbally here. In fact, two of them are a little bit softballs because I think you just covered one. Someone asked earlier about using Data Shuttle to bring Excel-based information into Smartsheet versus the Google Sheet and ERP scenario that you mentioned. A few minutes later, we got someone asking, will Data Shuttle work with OneDrive? So Amy, would you mind sharing that with the class?
Yes, absolutely. So while my example was I was pulling information from an ERP into Google Drive specifically, it could be a file that lives or an Excel file that lives directly on your computer. It could be an Excel file that lives in OneDrive and SharePoint. Those are all options for setting up your data shuttle workflow. So if I head back into editing my workflow and looking at my source data, that source data can pull from a Smartsheet attachment, which is an Excel file that just lives on your computer, OneDrive, SharePoint, or Box. So those are all options to pull data in from. Fantastic question.
And I've got one more to bring up live, and then Tim, if you want to come off mute or if you just want me to speak to it, is there a demo version that we could test if it is applicable to our business process? And I'll just go ahead and answer that. I would recommend that folks get in touch with their account teams so that you could be guided to what is most relevant to the plan types you're already on. As we saw from some questions, so many folks have different ways of using Smartsheet, ways of accessing it. So we want to make sure we give you the most recommended information. But yes, a lot of our clients do want to test it on their workbooks or their data sets, and we do generally support that. So just let's make sure to align the right tools for the plan and license type that you're on today.
And I had one question with Data Shuttle. Amy, could you go to the filters there? Great question. Could we see an example of filters? If you just hit, yeah, another filter. So any of those columns inside of that sheet there, you're able to kind of select, and then you'll see a similar filtering selection as you would normally in a sheet. So we could say contract status is equal to pending or not equal to pending. And then it will only select those items to pull in via data shuttle. So very similar filtering mechanism as a sheet.
And you'll notice if I have multiple filters, so contract is pending, end date is perhaps in the past or whatever value that I want to provide, I can then say for the filter logic, I want to filter rules 1 and 2 if both of those are met, or I can do 1 or 2 and do either of those. So that is how you could, for example, set up your filters. Fantastic questions.